here. I don't mean for everyone in the world. So I think this is primarily a Western story type. But Seamus Heaney, who gave us this really popular translation of Beowulf, so that when you went into chapters indigo, you know, people who had taken Beowulf in university and wished that they had never had to take Beowulf in university were shocked or stunned, or people who took it and loved it were suddenly loving it all the more because Seamus Heaney had given us this really vibrant translation, this lovely verse translation. But in his introduction to that version, he says that the plot is about these three archetypal sites of fear. And this goes back for me all the way to the first book I think I ever read that mentioned Beowulf. And I don't remember what it was. It was probably some book on monsters in general, some kid's book on monsters, talking about Beowulf as one of the first instances in Western culture of a horror story. Because you have, you know, we think of this as sort of a fantasy tale, but this has definitely got some really key monster types, and then the sort of places one goes to when you want to evoke horror. If you're going to, you know, scare your audience, where do you take them? You take them to the barricaded night house, the cabin in the woods, all those guys in that Antarctic station in John Carpenter's The Thing. Yes. Or, oh, that's cool, you guys. My people, you're my people. Or the ship in Alien. And one of the things that I don't have in the slideshow, but I noticed over and over again, thinking about it as I was watching the movies, is how many mess hall scenes there are.
Do they live there?
Exactly. Well, this is the thing, right? This is their space. And this barricaded night house in Beowulf, as I'm going to explain in just a little bit, this is the gathering place. This is where you go for feasting and for community. And with Grendel in there, you can't have that anymore. That's been taken from you. So in many ways, Grendel's moment is the haunted house. Freud has this, it's the only thing I like by Freud, actually. He's got this great essay called The Uncanny. And in it, he talks, because he was writing in German, he's got these two terms, heimlich and unheimlich. And this is homely and unhomely. We might think of it as, I belong in my home and I don't belong in my home. I can only ever think of Eddie Murphy doing his delirious comedy routine and talking about haunted houses and saying, you know, at the beginning of the Amityville Horror, where it's like, get out. And he's like, now if that was a bunch of people from my, you know, neighborhood, we'd have just all gotten out of the house right then. But you white people, you know, and he would go on about how stupid we are and we stay. Which is a really great moment of us understanding that contrivance, right? You do stay. The Anglo-Saxons have no choice but to stay. This is not like they, you know, remaxed their hall. This was something that they built, and they have to stay there. So we've got that haunted house is the first one. Grendel's mother in the infested underwater current. You are now somewhere where the elements are against you. Water is a great moment of horror for ancient peoples over and over again. Right back into the book of Job in the Bible, you've got the Leviathan at the end, and the Leviathan as representation of water to the ancient Middle East. In Babylonian literature, Canaanite literature, the water was bad. It would kill you. You go out in your ship, good luck. And that hasn't changed much, because one of the most dangerous occupations you can have in North America is fishermen, offshore fishermen. And so the imagination of the water as a place that can kill you just through storm, or the fact that beneath that surface, I don't know what's down there. I don't have scuba gear, you know, in an age like this. So what resides beneath the murk, especially in the kind of lake that Grendel's mother occupies, because it's that still, stagnant water that can have that, you know, scum on top. I don't know what's down there. It can jump out at me, right? So any sort of horror space where we're now out where something could happen to us, out in the woods. We've left civilization, and this is what's great about the poem, is that you read them leaving civilization to go out into the dark. And you have to go there if there's going to be any good moment of horror, right? No matter how much we slap the person next to us and go, that was stupid, why did they go out into the dark forest? It has to happen so someone can get eaten. Then we've got the dragon and the reptile-haunted rocks of a wilderness. Here, there isn't so much that fear of what pops out at you, because the dragon's huge, and it burns everything, but there is something really creepy, I find, when I watch Disney's Dragon Slayer. When they finally get up to where the dragon is, you know you're near a dragon's lair because the rocks are on fire. or there's bones, but there's no vegetation because this thing has burned everything away. And so the devastation of a dragon is very different from the devastation of these other monsters. And I think in some ways and this is sort of cross-cultural, but we're seeing the dragon as prototype of creatures that are like kaiju, giant monsters, the sort of thing that devastates not in a little space where you're confined, but in a big space where you can do nothing about this because of the size of the creature. And that's what I love about what I've seen for the previews of Godzilla coming out later this year, is that it just looks like, yeah, let's do that. Woo! I'm ridiculously excited about that, but I'm not supposed to be talking about that today. Maybe next year at the Edmonton Expo. If it sucks, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to. I'm going to be in therapy. Is what I'm going to do. But the previews that we've seen with dude from Breaking Bad, everything he says speaks to the kind of devastation that a dragon brings. So when Seamus Heaney says that we've got these sites, these archetypal sites of fear, that's what he's talking about. And I think that each of the Alien movies, as it turns out, and I just got lucky with this. I was like, I wonder. Because this is what academics do. We sit around and we go, I wonder about whatever it may be. And I wonder about pop culture. I wonder about science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And so I wonder about Alien. I wondered, does the entire trilogy match it? And there are ways that you can do this. I've read articles by people. They'll crowbar their theory into whatever it is. Alien was easy. Aliens, also easy. Alien 3 was my wild card because I couldn't remember. Going back and watching the special edition, and I was shocked by the number of things where I went, yup. So, what do I mean by all of this? That's it. So let's start with Grendel in the barricaded night house. 2 shots from the first Alien movie that I think sort of give us this idea. We've got the Nostromo as a safe space. Their conversations at the beginning of the film. When are we going to get paid? We're not going to do this thing because then we won't get paid. Eating, sitting around, doing their jobs. They're not in danger. And then they go down to this planet, and there's that lovely moment when they try to get John Hurt back on board, and Sigourney Weaver, Ripley refuses them access. Why? Because what you have with you could contaminate the ship. That idea of contamination, so strong with these sorts of narratives where you have an enclosed space and we won't be able to go anywhere once you bring that in here. Once that comes in, we're stuck with it. And I love the narrow, confined spaces that perhaps just budget alone required in those days. Thank God that it did, because they're awesome for that fear and that terror. And for the moments when we finally do see the alien and we're realizing, oh hey, dude in suit. The moments of confinement when it's off to the side, or that moment when it reaches out to hug the captain, over and over again we've just got that sense of claustrophobia, right? But this thing has come in from outside, and now it's here. It's here with us, and we have to deal with it. And again, you have Ripley. Ripley, over and over again, is a reluctant Beowulf. That's the difference. There's one difference right there, is that Beowulf seeks glory. Now, that's his culture. But it's also something that we see in male hero types, even in modern iterations. They seek to enlarge their fame or their glory. They may not state it overtly, but it's part and parcel of the character. For Tolkien, he's the guy that rescued Beowulf from an existence in Anglo-Saxon grammar. It was used as a primer for students who were learning Anglo-Saxon. And I can tell you, in departmental meetings and the conversations about where Anglo-Saxon is going in the university, if all Beowulf was a reading primer for people studying Anglo-Saxon, nobody would be taking it. We'd be losing it shortly, because that's one of the first things that people are going to cut when they're looking at cuts to their departments. It becomes a non-essential. But Tolkien said, why are we only studying this as a reading primer? There is a story here. There is a poem here. And this is part of the English heritage. So we should be looking at this. We should be looking at it as story. And his essay on it, Beowulf and the Critics, is great. And later, in fact, this next month, May, finally, his translation of Beowulf will be released so that we will all be able to read it. And from what I understand, yeah, it's awesome. From what I understand, it's very good. I haven't had a chance to look at it because I've been looking at student papers, which are just as good. But he associated the monsters with cold, darkness, and the wilderness. And so we've got that overlap there. But this is a little different. We have to understand the Anglo-Saxon mindset here, and this comes out of another Old English poem, Bede's, the work of Bede, and he talks about this sparrow. A bunch of people talking about what it's like to live at this time. What is it like to live in this world, in the Anglo-Saxon world? And they said, it's a little bit like if a sparrow flies into the meeting hall, into the warmth and the light. And I love this image with Heorot, this hall built upon a hill. You can see that little light spilling out from the interior. Everything else is darkness. And a sparrow flies into that hall, and warmth and light, sound and joy, and then it flies out back to the darkness. And that's what life is like. That's bleak. And we're going to return to that. To imagine, what this would be like, if you've ever been to Fort Edmonton and stood in the fort, try to think back to imagining that Edmonton isn't there at all, and all you have is the fort. I remember standing up in the great house and looking out towards the trees and going, oh, and it just hit me. This is the same sort of hall. This is the same sort of place. And you travel through the darkness, and then there's this light. And you go in, and you're able to enjoy it, but you're going to go back out to the darkness at some point. And that's going to be important for us. I needed to sort of go through that. The Nostromo becomes this for the Alien, the first Alien movie. It's going to, they're going on a rescue mission. So potentially, if there were people at the other end, they're the light, they're the warmth, they're the goodness, right? And into this space of safety comes this threat. And it's not a threat where there's moral ambiguity. And this is one of the great things about the Alien series, is that we never had to feel bad for the xenomorph. In a way that, Zemeckis' Beowulf really makes Grendel, as horrifying as he is, sympathetic in those moments when he curls up into the fetal position and his mother comforts him. There's that moment of, oh, don't do that. Like Alan Rickman as the Sheriff of Nottingham. I couldn't hate him. He was too charming. I like him too much. Yeah, he was great, right? But he's not he becomes the ambiguous villain. We've got lots of those now, The actor who plays Loki, help me here.
Tom Hiddleston.
Thank you. Talking about the films is saying, he's been saying, what you've got is a sort of flattening out of these things to some degree. We're problematizing the heroes and giving them some edge, right? Where maybe they never did before. There was no moral ambiguity with Thor in the early work. But now he has to question stuff. And Loki becomes sympathetic between a combination of the charisma of the actor alone and the fan base that follows that, as well as the way that the character is being constructed. Ruth Staver